In previous videos, I've shown off some merchandise that I own for some of the series that I review, whether it be DVDs or t-shirts or just expressing some memories that I've had with some games, movies, shows, etc. And there's even some stuff that I've never brought up because I just forgot. But I've never been able to show off some Shrek merch for 2 games now, and the thing I do own is a Shrek the Third cereal bowl. I don't know how long I've had this, I just remember it being in the household, and I've eaten out of it multiple times. I might get clowned on for this, but knowing me, there's no way I can't bring this one up. But anyways, onto the video. Shrek the Third. The third movie of the Shrek franchise that revolved around Shrek getting Artie to rule over the kingdom of Far Far Away after King Harold's passing. But oh boy, things don't go the way they want it to. Arthur himself doesn't want to be king, Prince Charming attacks the castle to take the throne on their trip away, and... Yeah, that. Something that I haven't gotten the chance to mention yet is a certain curse that can happen with animated movies, where the first 2 movies are really good, but then the third one happens and then it begins to feel like the series is starting to overstay its welcome. This doesn't happen all the time, but when it does, it's pretty bad. Shrek was very prominent with this curse. Shrek 1, a very solid classic DreamWorks movie. Shrek 2, deemed as one of the best animated sequels ever. The third movie had a lot to live up to, and yikes. Then there's the game. There was an Xbox 360 Blockbuster commercial. Yeah, remember Blockbuster? You should, given the general age of my audience, unless a lot of you are just lying about it. This 2007 commercial promoted 3 license-based games: Spider-Man 3, which I haven't played, Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End, played the Wii version and don't like that, and this game. These were the shining lineup for Blockbuster. In fact, when I ordered a copy of this game from Amazon, it came in a Blockbuster case. I almost didn't want to sell it later on because this thing is a relic. I also noticed a quality guaranteed sticker at the bottom of the case. That's rather interesting. Let's keep this in mind as I review the Shrek the Third video game. Trust me, it'll be very important to pay attention to that little sticker. This game covers the movie, like most games, but this rendition of that trope does it a little bit differently. It's essentially looking back on the story through the performance of a puppet show in front of an audience, and I find this to be pretty cool. Now, retelling events after the fact isn't the most original thing to be done. A couple of games have covered their stories using this method, but it's always refreshing to have a retelling because it's something that's different than just a normal story and actually gives me something to critique. Plus, it fits well with the major tie that Shrek the Third had with plays. I mean, yeah, it's a puppet show, but that's kinda similar to plays. Same difference, really. It also fits with the theme of Shrek overall, being about fairy tales and their stories being told to you. It's similar to what was done with the Shrek 2 game, but in a different way, which is nice. Also similarly to the Shrek 2 game, there are some events that are added in to expand the world of Shrek, such as meeting the Lady of the Lake for Artie's final exam, a detour caused by Merlin's magic involving an evil queen, this one specifically, and evil Pinocchios made by Stromboli. Also, some pirates try to take the boat before Shrek and the gang goes on their voyage, but that doesn't really matter. Now, as I recall from my Shrek 2 review, the changes for that game helped the story while simultaneously not helping it. So, is that the same case here? Kinda. I wish I didn't have to use that phrase again for this video, but here we are. The detour made to the Evil Queen's castle by Merlin's magic brings more emphasis on the fact that he's out of practice with it and prone to mistakes sending multiple people to different locations, since in the movie he gets all of them there while just swapping the bodies of Donkey and Puss. Stromboli's toy workshop shows Stromboli getting his revenge on Pinocchio, as his hatred towards Pinocchio is actually mentioned in the movie. The problems for me are the pirates early on, as I mentioned before, and Artie's final exam, since he was a lot more excited to leave, at least initially in the movie. But the other things I feel do overweigh the negatives here. So in short, it does the same stuff that the Shrek 2 game does, but more in its benefit. Some of the story bits are told through the puppet show that I brought up before, and they are quite nice. Even subtle details like the screws and sticks of stick puppets being visible, the fact that you can tell that the background is made of cardboard is painted over. There's even a moment where the narrator and an actor break character.
Searched frantically because her friends' very lives depended upon her.
You don't have to be so rude.
It's realistic and has life to it, and I like that. In fact, the CGI cutscenes in general look great. A few things look weird to me, but other than that, it's fine. In-game, however, doesn't hold up nearly as well. The environments and character models look fine, for the most part, but the animations for cutscenes and the faces feel incredibly lifeless. The faces throw off anything that isn't a human, and even then, that's a little debatable. Shrek looks stoned the entire game, Donkey's eyelids are peeled back, and Puss is just staring into an abyss. The animation feels so still, and there are also some moments where characters aren't even looking at each other, or their heads aren't angled to look at a character that's shorter or taller than them, and it's painfully obvious. And look, the Shrek 2 game and Smash & Crash Racing doesn't exactly look the best, but I much prefer those in comparison to this. I felt life in those, but here, there's hardly any. Keep in mind, for most of the consoles that this was released on, this is a console generation after the previous 2 games. Oh, and enemies clip straight through walls when finishing them near one. That's the worst of the presentation though, so at the very least, the rest of this will be easier on me. With the voice work, almost none of the voice actors are the same. That's not really new with Shrek. Pretty much every game before this point has done that. Honestly, I'll be surprised if any Shrek game breaks the mold there. At the very least, they got Skipper's voice actor back. Yes, Skipper from Madagascar. That's because Skipper actually shows up in the game. He's not really referenced or anything, he's just there in one of the levels.
We're going to the wide open spaces of Antarctica. To the wild.
It's funny to imagine the penguins interacting with Shrek characters though. Regardless, they all do good jobs, there's not much to complain about there. The writing is pretty good as well. There's some really good jokes such as,
1,000 scoundrels have died of my dose. Why do you think Peter Pan isn't in this game?
I will take my leave, boss, and meet you at Arthur's Academy.
And I suppose you've got something better to do?
I have a lady friend nearby.
We don't have a crew, Donkey. They're trying to steal our boat.
What? Oh, they can kiss me.
get it? Because he's a jack. But yeah, there's a good amount of clever jokes. The only ones I don't like is whenever Shrek looks at the camera, but I feel that's because they made him look stoned. The soundtrack is alright. It's not bad, but it's definitely not that memorable either, aside from a few songs, one of them being a song that was used in Shrek 2, and another one that sounds like the Pirates of the Caribbean theme. As if we wouldn't notice it. You travel across far away, platforming between areas and defeating any enemies you come across. Depending on the level, you will play as certain characters that have some different abilities, but each of them have a standard attack combo and a chargeable strong attack. By stunning or dealing enough damage to enemies, you can potentially perform a finishing move on them, which instantly kills them. When taking enemies down, blue and purple orbs appear from them. This is fairy dust that you can pick up to add to your fairy dust meter. However, taking too much damage will result in you dropping fairy dust. If you have enough meter filled, you can perform a special move, which is different depending on the character. Shrek's special move hits all around him and he's able to push crates, pick up and throw objects, and launch enemies into the air with a charged strong attack and catch them. Donkey's fairy dust attack headbutts enemies, instantly knocking them to the ground. Puss distracts enemies, making them able to be taken down with finishers. Arthur shoots an air wave, and now that I think about it, that's the only projectile in the game without throwing an object. Sleeping Beauty is able to float down large drops, and her special move makes enemies fight each other. Fiona has a lunging kick that can push large blocks. Shrek and Fiona have an additional fairy dust move that is usable when the meter is completely filled. When this is activated, time is slowed down. I wonder if Fiona taught Shrek that, since that seems to be a consistent thing with her and ogres in general in the games. Like it's only them that know how to slow down time. Well, anyways, occasionally there will be some segments where you have to shoot down some towers with ballistas and catapults. Around areas are coins which are added to a total of pounds at the end of levels. You also obtain bonuses depending on what you've done in said levels, such as destroying some thingies, yes it actually says that, and how high you got your style, which is raised through combos and finishers. These pounds can be spent at the gift shop to get some extras for the game. There's a good amount of extra content in this game. This includes special objectives during the story mode that you can try and complete, and for the most part they aren't too hard to get. It's usually finding a certain amount of objects or doing finishers enough times, stuff like that. There's also drawings hidden in levels that you can find, and all of the money you collect can be put to good use. There's costumes for characters as well as some other difficulties that can make the game easier or harder, as well as adding on bonus fairy dust or damage to yourself. So if you wanted to replay the game, for whatever reason, there's enough incentive to. The problem with that is... the gameplay is not worth it. Combat overall is just lame. This game is essentially a beat 'em up, and beating enemies up, you know, the main point of the genre, doesn't feel good. Other games that follow some similar format are usually satisfying because they either involve performing combos that can lead to great damage, you can combine powers together to make something really cool, or even both of those things if the game is really good. But for the most part, fighting in this game is unappetizing. There's not enough moves in this game to not feel like you're doing the same thing 100 times in a row, and that one thing you are doing doesn't even flow well. It feels clunky and sluggish. You play as 6 characters throughout the game, and the only one that I had any major enjoyment with was Fiona, but you only get to play as her for 2 levels out of 20. Another problem that adds to this is the difficulty, and it's not because it's too hard. It's actually pathetically easy unless you play on the hard difficulty, which I did as I started to get bored playing this game. But with this comes a philosophy of mine that I'd like to share. Harder difficulties will bring to light faults that easier difficulties can breeze past. This game is a shining example with its enemy AI. The AI has one mindset: to get to you as soon as possible and attack you without caring about what's in their way. That sounds somewhat fair. Most games are like that. Now, I'm going to repeat that, but also have some different footage. The AI has one mindset: to get to you as soon as possible and attack you without caring about what's in their way. Maybe now you see what I mean. No matter what's in front of them, be it a box, a ledge, or a curtain of a stage, they will 8 out of 10 times run into it nonstop, which makes them look like complete idiots. But what makes them look even more so like idiots is whenever you leave some areas, they'll go back to their original spots, or try to, and end up running into a wall in the opposite direction for some reason. And most characters don't have projectiles, so you can't cheese these out. That's not the problem, though they still look stupid. The problem is when they get near you. Enemies can very easily smack you around constantly because some of your attacks are just too slow to even hit them when you're surrounded. Need I remind you that getting hit too much makes you lose meter, which in some cases is the only way to get enemies off of you, and while blocking keeps you from losing meter, it doesn't really keep you from taking damage. It seems like you still take chip damage when blocking, and I guess that would be fine if you could potentially outrun your enemies, but that's really not possible at all. On hard, some fights end up being challenging for these reasons, and they are not good ones. On top of that, there are enemies that, in addition to all of that, don't stagger from most of your attacks. These also happen to have the strongest attacks in the game that tend to be just as fast as other attacks, so when they get close to you, you are constantly at death's doorstep. In order to ensure survivability, you're kind of forced to play the game as boring and drawn out as possible, and hoping you don't get hit. So with all of that, the difficulties might as well be mow down everything in your path by walking, an absolute snooze fest, and an oddly frustrating bore. How did you manage to mess up every single difficulty for almost the exact same reasons? I don't think you could have made any of the difficulties any worse. So for the playable characters, you've got Shrek, Donkey, Puss, and Fiona, who you normally expect in just about every Shrek game. Then there's Arthur, who joins in as an addition for the third movie. That makes sense. But then Sleeping Beauty is playable. That's an interesting choice. I would have just had Fiona be playable at more levels since they would basically be in the same areas. That, and she's more fun to play as in my opinion. Sleeping Beauty's float and attacks are really slow. Like, it's almost painful how slow she is sometimes. There were also 2 other gift shop things that I didn't mention yet. One of them is stuff having to do with the minigames, which are kinda hit or miss. I can imagine that you would get some kind of enjoyment out of these with friends, but there are definitely better options for multiplayer games even in the same series. These just get kind of boring at some point. The other thing is some commentary over levels by some of the characters, and they can actually be funny sometimes, but from what I've noticed, they are only at the beginning of levels instead of throughout the level, which you probably expect from commentary given over levels, and even then they don't really talk about the levels, it's more just some conversations.
My shoes? What about my shoes?
They are elegant and fashionable, it is true, but so last season.
Oh, please, what would you know? You're a cat.
Do you question my taste, sir?
What I meant was that while you are, of course, very up-to-date on feline footwear, those boots are quite stylish. Spectacular, actually. I wasn't aware you kept track of human fashions.
Very well. I accept your apology.
Maybe I'm expecting a bit too much, but that's just how I felt about it. Well, that was a shipwreck. I guess this game couldn't escape the fate that the movie had of being inferior to its predecessor. This game is a trudge to get through, and to some I can imagine the payoff isn't worth it in the slightest. It can expand on the story all at once, but that can't balance out the boring and upsetting gameplay, which takes up much more of the game and is also a much bigger focus. There's not much of a reason to really remember this game either. The music isn't really that great, the graphics are pretty subpar but not enough to be claimed as some of the worst of all time. The gameplay is infuriating, but I've dealt with worse. The worst part is, I've actually played this game before, and just like the movie, I pretty much forgot everything. A good amount of the other Shrek games have been more memorable by the general population as well. Shrek 2, Smash and Crash Racing, and especially Super Slam have been memed and talked about a lot on YouTube, but the third hasn't. Maybe we just have to wait on that resurgence, but honestly, if it didn't come from the time when those were starting to pop off, I don't think it ever will. Oh, and this game has a demo for the B-movie game, so I kinda figured how this game was gonna be as soon as I went into the main menu. But remember that Blockbuster quality guarantee sticker? I'm just saying, if this was considered to have that sticker and also promoted in a commercial, maybe there's a reason there's only one Blockbuster left in the world. What's going on, my fellow residents? It's me, TheFrozenCavern, and thank you guys for making it to the end of this video. It has been quite a while since I did my last Shrek game, and honestly, I should probably do more of them. The only ones that I can really have any form of major intent to do is Shrek Super Slam, that one I'm definitely doing at some point, and then the final chapter game. Now, I don't know when I would do those, I have a good amount of other games on my plate right now. But in terms of Shrek games, those are definitely the two that I plan on doing the most. But going back to the forgettability of Shrek the Third, I remember having a conversation with someone on my college campus about the Shrek movies, and I remember saying that the only thing I remembered about Shrek the Third was the color palette being basically green, brown, and a splash of red and blue, basically being Arthur and Merlin. That was literally it. Fun fact, this is the only source of material that I had to re-watch before doing a review because I just didn't remember a lot of what happened. I have watched some things for the first time, but this is the first time I've had to re-watch anything. That says a lot about this movie's quality. But personally, I do like the fourth movie at the very least. But regardless, make sure you guys go down to the description below because that is where all of my social medias are located. My Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Discord are all in the description, and there are all ways for you guys to be notified on whenever I have an update for the channel or whenever my next video comes out. But if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more, as well as share this video out with your friends and family. But until the next video, take care.